Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Friday, October the 3rd, 2025, and today we are taking a question from a flower grower wondering about synthetic fertilizers to address soil deficiencies, Meta pirating farm books for AI, and it's Feedback Friday. So let's do it. All right, happy Friday, everyone. Look at us, 240 episodes into this podcast. Some of you have watched or listened to almost or maybe all of those episodes, which is incredible, you nerds. I hope everyone is having a successful harvest day today if you're doing that, or getting your fall garden set up or your summer gardens cleaned up. I'm doing a little bit of all of the above, I guess. Got the garlic finished yesterday and a little bit of the sweet potatoes dug, which is nice. There's still some damage, but not as much as I thought there would be. And I'm just kind of reburying some of those more damaged ones, just so they can replenish the soil, just giving a little bit back. Planning to do a little more of that potato digging today, then I'll finish the harvest off probably next week and get it into cover crops while the sweet potatoes do their curing thing, so that should be fun. Anyway, it is Friday, which means Feedback Friday, where we explore what you all were saying about this week's topics. On Monday, we talked about heating tunnels and took a question from Denmark about moving a greenhouse. At Vaping Fisherman 2513 wrote, quote, to the Dane from a fellow Dane, remember we need permits for all quote-unquote buildings above 8 square meters, or if our combined square meter of extra buildings reach above 60 square meters, end quote. And I quoted this not because I know anything about the local building laws that are there in Denmark. I mean, of course I do. I just don't want to, show off or anything. But because this is something that gets new farmers in trouble sometimes. Not every property can just become a farm with animals or greenhouses, etc., without checking with your local, laws and regulations. So make sure to heed those. That's important. Don't want to get anybody in trouble or have you put up a greenhouse or something and then they just make you take it back down. That's not great. That day at John 6:1749 asked, quote, was wondering if I could just leave the clear plastic over the tunnels all winter since we have not received enough rain to get any cover crop to sprout, let alone grow, end quote. Bummer about the rains. I'm not sure how it relates to cover crops, but yes, typically plastic does stay on tunnels through the winter for most of us. It's hard to put on and then take off in general, though there is a case to be made for occasionally allowing some weathering, like taking the plastic off, maybe when you're replacing it or something, to allow the rain to sort of wash out some of the salts that tend to collect. But that's often more of a conventional production problem than an organic production problem, generally speaking. I guess just make sure the plastic is very well secured over the winter, but there's no harm in taking it off. It's just, a little bit of extra work. On Tuesday, we celebrated our 1-year anniversary of the show. You all rock. At Monoclimbing wrote, quote, hi Jesse from Spain and the Pyrenees. Keep the show and podcast as it is. I like 20 minutes duration. Perfect to start the day and the market garden I am in. I have learned so much from your work, book, and podcast. Thank you so much. Wish you the best to all of you. End quote. And thank you. I agree. I think the 20-minute duration is nice for a daily show. I couldn't honestly do much more in this exact style. A conversational style podcast could probably go a lot longer, but for this informational style, to be accurate, 20 minutes requires like 8 hours of labor. So yeah, probably not a whole lot more I could do on that front without a, doubled budget or something. Also, you will notice, as we have, that Europe and England are strongly represented both in our Patreon membership and general viewers, watchers, commenters. We have even vaguely discussed the idea of No-Till Growers Europe one day, where we could do more Eurocentric content, but also sell the book in French and German and Italian because it's already translated into those, which is awesome. Plus English, which obviously would help with our fundraising. Also offering hats and such without both the tariff costs and or wild shipping costs that already have existed for years. On the tariffs front, apologies to anyone who orders something from us from outside of the country right now. You may have to pay an import tax on it, and there is nothing we can do about that unless we operate in those other countries, of course. So sorry for that, but who knows? Maybe one day we'll be able to expand. On Wednesday, we did our monthly live show, which is always a good time. Thank you to everyone who came out for that. I know it's an awkward time of the day, 9 a.m. Eastern on a Wednesday, but I'm always impressed with how many people show up to that. In that live, we talked about hornworms and things like armyworms on tomatoes. At Devin Sullivan 7233 wrote, quote, BT is not the only option for caterpillar spray. Spinosad is another great option. It has a longer residual as well. Products like Monterey Garden Insect and another called Captain Jack's Dead Bug. The great thing about Spinosad is that it kills many more sucking insects like thrips as well as caterpillars, end quote. So yes, and thank you. This is an option and there are others, but it's actually that broad spectrumness that I don't love about these things, like spinosad, because I don't necessarily want it harming other insects, or especially not the good guys. BT is nice in that way because it is a bacterium that is pretty well dialed into the species that it kills. There are worse things, though, than spinosad. It's just, I try to avoid all sprays as much as possible, but especially those broad spectrum ones, just for the beneficials, the good guys. Then on Thursday, we discussed clay and working with good soil, and then having to work with challenging soil. In that episode, I also talked about humanity's predilection for being parasitic to some extent, and at Woo Training Wheels wrote, quote, that's fun to say, has a Z at the end too, that makes it fun, quote, bit of a negative view of humans for that first question. Obviously, consumerism brought about large-scale and quick methods that harm the environment, but that has not been true for all generations. Small scale then adapts to these methods, end quote. Thanks, but I don't think it's necessarily a negative view. I think it's just kind of a realistic one. The vast majority of people today, certainly here in America, but most of the developed world as well, consume significantly more than they return to the earth in a positive way. That's just the way we've set up the world. Yes, there are people doing good things or who care, like basically everyone who listens to or watches the show among them. So shouts to you. But there are also just billions of other people on the planet. I got caught behind a trash truck for 2 blocks in New York City once, and I got to see in a single week just how much that 1-2 block stretch in Brooklyn throws out in trash alone. Stuff that was taken from the earth and will largely become CO2, methane, and or just remain plastic for the next 1,000 years. And it was stunning to see how fast that truck filled up. There are millions of blocks like that in the United States alone, including on a more spread out scale, my own block, where every single week that same amount of trash collection happens. Starting a small farm is great, but it's not solving our waste with no return issue. That's going to require a revolution of concern for the planet, and one that I use this platform to gently promote, with massive systemic overhauls. So not negative or positive, just something we need to keep in mind and continue to work towards changing, which I'm optimistic we can do if we want to. But it's going to take us talking about it and also just pointing out some of the flaws of our society. Also that day, at Chrissy B65 asked, quote, isn't it too early to still plant the garlic? End quote. And that may be a whole good segment on its own. It's a great question, but the answer is not necessarily. A lot of that will depend on where you are and the variety of garlic that you're using and the depth you're planting, etc. The general recommendation is to wait until you are 2 to 4 weeks out from a frost, which in theory we are that here. We usually get our first frosts starting in October 10th, though I don't know that it's frosted before like October 20th in a long time. Or you want to wait until the soil temperatures are below 85 degrees Fahrenheit. That's like 29 degrees Celsius at a depth of around 2 to 3 inches, so like 5 centimeters-ish deep. So in our case, it's been a warm season, but the nights have been cool, so the soil is in a decent place temperature-wise. That said, with the winter-killed pea trial that I'm doing, I kind of don't have a choice but to plant it if I want the garlic to be interplanted into that winter-kill cover crop. For us, the first week of October is about as early as I would plant here. We've done late September with okay results, but I think that depends on the season. And I would maybe hold off on planting if I was much further south than I am here in Kentucky, Zone 6B, but I usually just say October is fair game, especially if you plan to mulch, which will cool the soil down. More maybe next week on that, because it's not a topic I've covered actually, but there's a lot of good research that gives us some insight. There's research in certain areas that shows better yields with earlier planting. So we'll dive into that a little bit, but I think there's a lot of context there to take into consideration. All right. Huge shouts to all of you for the contributions as always. Thank you so much for the support and for being such awesome commenters. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, is it okay to occasionally dip into the conventional fertilizer toolkit for flower production? BRB.
Hey guys, Jasmine in North Alabama. Not a garden video, just want to show you guys these tomatoes that one of my coworkers planted around the office.
Farmer Claire Coleman here from the Winter Growers Podcast. Did you know that I also founded Real Farmer Care, a nonprofit that supports farmer well-being? From my own experiences farming, I knew firsthand that this type of support was missing from ag, so I decided to do something about it. As of today, there are over 500 farmer recipients of a $100 self-care award, with more applying daily. If you'd like to help, each $100 donated supports one new farmer. Visit realfarmercare.com to donate and learn more. Again, that's realfarmercare.com.
If you, the listener or viewer, are enjoying this podcast, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere the questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions. Now, today's Patreon question comes to us from Patreon member Billy Reese, who writes, quote, I'm a flower grower. Last spring, my soil test revealed my new plots are low on P and K, that's phosphorus and potassium. The suggestion that came back with it was to use turf starter fertilizer to amend the soil, i.e. 19-25-5, which actually makes a lot of sense. I found an 18-20-10 formula. I'm not certified organic grower, but I prioritize organic growing and sustainable farming practices. The turf starter formula specifically states not for agricultural use, while making it seem that the fertilizer is somewhat risky to use. Ingredients are ammonium phosphorus, urea, potassium chloride, sodium molybdate, all polymer coated. My question is, while I know this is perfectly fine for flower growing, I don't want to add any amendments to my soil that may have long-term impacts in the event I convert beds for food production or pasture in the future. I'm not opposed to non-organic methods for occasional use, but I also don't want to contaminate my soil with persistent chemicals, metals, etc. Is this too risky, or should I try to formulate my own organic, much more expensive, fertilizer using something like rock phosphate and langbeinite? For example, I'm amending this week as I prep beds for cover crops. My production this year was abysmal and I really need to get my soil ready for next spring, end quote. Okay, so great question here, Billy, and I appreciate when people feel comfortable coming to me with questions about conventional methods and where to draw the line or what to consider. I do try to be non-dogmatic about these things and be considerate to what people have access to and their budgets and those sorts of things. Because frankly, it's easy for me to just say, like, just add compost instead. And honestly, compost probably would do much of the work here on the P and K side. But that's not always a helpful answer. One, because compost can be expensive depending on the amount of land we're talking here. And two, because not everyone has access to the same quality of compost. Likewise, it's not helpful for me to just say, don't use chemical fertilizers without offering some context and some alternatives. Now, to your question about long-term impacts, the first thing that stands out to me here is in this fertilizer formula that you sent is the polymer coating. Those can lead to microplastic buildup, which can alter microbial richness and makeup in different ways depending on your pH. They may also, as you expressed, lead to more metal bioavailability, which may not be great for both cut flowers that people may be handling, and also, anything if you do turn that into a food plot later. Also, are you certain there are no pesticides or fungicides, etc. in this material? That could likewise be a concern and maybe part of the reason that they recommend it not for agricultural use. I wouldn't want you to mess with your insect or microbial populations. So indeed, even if the products you intend to sell will not be eaten, in this case flowers, people will be handling these flowers. They may be sitting on dining tables and the soil may have some long-term effects, especially if these are, slow release fertilizers. The extent of those effects and how long they stick around and how difficult they are to reduce is hard to say. And they may down the line make it harder to grow said crop without soil health issues. Now, on the alternatives front, potassium is relatively easy to find in things like green sand, compost, wood ash if tested. As for phosphorus, bone meal is an abundant one, and rock phosphate is another option, a finite one though, so perhaps look for other options if you can. Compost/manure will always remain the easiest way to access, both of those nutrients for the price as well as nitrogen, but harder to dial in precisely and not always accessible, obviously. The nice thing, however, about rock minerals and manures and composts, etc., is that they last longer, or more precisely, they benefit the soil longer than the synthetic versions a lot of times, even the slow release ones, and plants are more able to use them if they make a relationship with the microbes that then release those nutrients in a way that makes them bioavailable to the plants. Every product will differ, but once you add rock nutrients, albeit more expensive, the job is largely done. You may have to dial it in a little bit here or there over the years, but it's mostly, where it needs to be for the foreseeable future. Compost is a little less stable, but not by much. My phosphorus levels remain high in areas I have not applied compost since the beds were created like 4 years ago. So it's a high upfront investment maybe, but a better long-term solution with fewer risks. Formulating your own then might indeed be my recommendation here, where compost is not an option, and maybe even start by looking at the alternative amendment options available at places like Seven Springs Farm Supply is a good one. There may be something closer to what you were looking for, or a couple things that could be mixed together for you to make your sort of goal there. Anyway, I don't know if that was super helpful, but I genuinely appreciate the question. Sometimes the price makes these synthetic fertilizers look more attractive, but the price belies the cost, the real cost, the cost of the soil and ultimately the cost of production down the line. Like my kids play around our flower beds. It's not anything I would necessarily want to put something weird there just because nobody's going to be eating them. Anyway, all right, you all let me know your all's thoughts on this and anything else we talk about. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about some of the farm books that AI models have pirated to train on. Be right back. Today's episode is brought to you by Farmhand. Renewal season is here, and the work you put in now is what brings members back next year. Ari Memar, founder of Farmhand and a guest you've heard on this podcast, has worked with regenerative farmers to create a playbook that turns renewal season into a growth season. One farmer, Melanie at Shake Fork Community Farm, brought in $40,000 in renewals in just 2 weeks using this strategy. Now, Ari and Melanie are sharing the exact approach in a free live workshop and downloadable playbook. Watch on demand and get the playbook at farmhand.partners/no-till. That's farmhand.partners/no-till. All right, back to the show. All right, so I was reading an article about pirated books the other day, and I discovered there's a search tool called Libgen, Libgen, which is a list of 7.5 million books that have been pirated to train AI models on. The main one being Meta's AI program, meaning these companies didn't even have the decency to pay for a single copy on which to train their AI models, but rather they stole the books and then stole the information and then plagiarized that information for their own profit. And I was like, oh, I wonder if the Living Soil Handbook is one of those books. And so I did a quick search, and it is, in fact, and I will link Libgen in the show notes, but here's a short list of some of the other titles I found from farmers in no particular order. Neil Kinsey's Hands-On Agronomy, J.M. Fortier's The Market Gardener and The Winter Market Gardener, both in French and English, Elliot Coleman's books in multiple editions, Leah Penniman's Farming While Black and Black Earth Wisdom, authors like Daniel Mays, Pam Dalling, Bill Mollison, they were all found there as well. In fact, I just kind of stopped because I was finding everybody I looked for. As far as I can tell, it's practically every published farm author whose books appear on the list. Now, you might ask, why does this matter? Well, first, it takes copyrighted material and profits from the information. We can't do that in any other forum. I don't understand why we're allowing it to happen with AI. Second, my concern isn't that no one will read books anymore, or for that matter, watch videos or read articles, as both will increasingly be created by AI. It's that there will be so many versions of all of these things that it will just straight up not be worth creating more of them. Farm books already do not make most authors enough money or really any money to justify their production. Most of them do not make a profit. That will only get worse. Farm videos increasingly do not make the creator enough money to justify their creation. With the saturation from AI, that will only become more of a reality. Indeed, it is not the replacement of humans by AI that will cause a catastrophic shift away from, contextual information on how to grow food from people actually doing that work. It's just the straight up saturation that concerns me, meaning there will still be a lot of people who want their information to come directly from someone actually doing the research or doing the work, but there will be fewer of those people able to financially justify bothering with sharing that information. However, there's a growing number of people who won't and don't care about that and find AI's convenience to be worth that risk. Now, you may ask, if they are using all the work of these farmers, then the information should be better, right? It should be more accessible. Everybody should be able to get it. Obviously, not right now. It's not. I mean, the Google search term is stunningly ill-informed somehow, but even if it is in the near future, if people are pulling back on what they are willing to produce for the world, like real people, because what's the point if they can't even get paid for the labor involved, then the available information will hit a wall, a stopping point. We need people trying new tools and new techniques and sharing those endeavors, especially as the earth warms or possibly one day cools dramatically as it did in the Younger Dryas, or whatever range of events happen, especially as we run into new plant diseases, insect declines, all the contextual challenges that will arise. We need new information all of the time. And I fear the AI thievery we are currently seeing, where no doubt one day someone will just be able to ask a prompt to create a Farmer Jesse style video about growing potatoes specifically in New Hampshire, and it will create something exactly like what you're watching with targeted ads that company will benefit from, but tailored for you without offering anything to no-till growers or whatever other sources it stole from. And so we will stop creating content like this because it just won't be worth creating it. And the information will only be as good as what is currently available, as determined by some ones and zeros who have never touched a potato or the soil of New Hampshire. Anyway, that is just something that is constantly on my mind, because the narrative around AI is how much easier it makes things, or how helpful it can be, or how much it can do for you, when in reality, all it's doing is stealing from the past, present, and effectively the future. Stealing from artists, from farmers, from you, and effectively your family. All that to say, this is a choice we're making, allowing these tools into our lives, but it doesn't have to be, and we can encourage more regulation of these things. We kind of need to. Anyway, I am a bit negative about AI for sure, but hopeful about people. So I hope everyone has a great weekend. Don't forget to cheer on Racing Louisville this weekend, official NWSL team of no-till market gardeners. Don't know who originally said that, but it's just a fun fact. Plus, Brighton and all the rest of my teams, and the teams I coach. I guess that not the worst idea to cheer them on. Don't forget, No-Till Growers is now officially a nonprofit 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. Your Patreon donations count, but you can also follow the links in the show notes for other ways to do that if Patreon is not your style. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you're getting this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out as well. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors, and if you'd ever like to sponsor the show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at no-tillgrowers.com. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music and Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. I'll wait. Pick up a hat or a copy of the Living Soil Handbook at no-tillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/no-tillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of October, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to Robert Scott Frawley, or Fraley? Frawley, I think. Frawley. Got a W in there. It looks good. Kyle Richardville, Patrick Weaver, Alex and Oliver, Bill King, Chris Yates, and Ian at Grindstone Farms. Shouts to all of you for keeping the story going this week. All right, so to round out this story, Dennis, who you remember is an author, finishes his first full day of work at the AI company, creating content for them and then judging how well the box interprets its stories. Like how well does it turn these into 3D images that you can watch and sort of interact with. And it really is extraordinary. It sort of blows Dennis's mind. And on the way to his mother's house, he's thinking about all this, and as he's thinking about it, he's passing all these new data centers that have been built over the last few years, and they stretch on for miles. In fact, he would admit, it's been a little bit too long since he went to visit his mom, so he's surprised by how the landscape has changed there. Anyway, when he gets to his mom's house, he sees the laundry piled up, the dishes undone. This is not, to be clear, his mom's style. And she's perfectly healthy. She just tells him that the water has been decreasing for weeks. He starts to poke around and discovers there's almost no water coming to the house. He finds a bill on the table and sees where the cost of electricity has skyrocketed. And he asks his mom, Mom, why is your electric bill $1,000? And she says she doesn't know. She's, been using less and less electricity, but it just keeps going up. And he sees a neighbor across the street and he decides to stop that neighbor and talk to him. And the neighbor kind of confirms, the data centers are driving the cost of everything up and people are losing their water and electricity is going, through the roof. And the neighbor who has lived there since before Dennis was born tells Dennis they are, they're selling the farm, and speculates they'll probably get about half of what they would have 5 years ago for their farm, and suggests that Dennis and his mom should maybe think about doing the same. Dennis then takes his mom back to his house with her dishes and her laundry. And the next day, this is the last story he inputs into the machine before walking out. Boom. All right. Thanks for watching and/or listening. We will see you on Monday. We'll talk soil health and stuff next week. Less AI stuff. It's depressing. Bye.